Hello, everyone. It's a session on color and contrast, and I'm Poongodi Geetha-Loganathan, 2023 Accessibility Fellow, Work Group Member, and Associate Professor in Environmental Sciences. So I would like to start thanking Casey, Bremen, and our group because the slides I'm showing today are been adapted and modified from the presentations from previous years. So color is essential to communicate digital intents, but we need to be careful to combine it with visible indicators so that we could be able to effectively communicate the contents. So this presentation will be all about color and contrast. When I talk about color and contrast, this is a sort of more advanced topic when it comes to accessibility. So the basic principles and basic accessibility things comes before, and then this will be after that. So from previous accessibility sessions, you would have heard the point to use color carefully because color contrast will be able to determine how people could be able to interact with the contents presented. So a low color contrast will be difficult to read for people, whereas when we have a high color contrast, that makes it easier to perceive the contents that are presented. So why do we need to even use colors? So we often need to use colors for branding, for example, for Selena Oswego, we need to have colors, or to not to make the contents pretty boring. So we want to highlight certain things. So just to have some visual interest, we need to have colors used. And then often we need to group contents. So we use colors for certain groups so that we could be able to highlight critical points. And then we can communicate an emotion, we could communicate a tone by using color. So for all these reasons, we use color normally. So the objective of this session or objective of talking about color and contrast and accessibility is not to get about using color and contrast, instead to use them wisely to disseminate our contents to be inclusive for everyone who reads it. So what are the guidelines? So number one, do not present contents just using color alone. So there are several additional things that we could think about and we can use along with color. So it could be efficient in communicating materials. And number two, to use text cues and labels. So not just restricting ourselves to use symbols. For example, if we are using graphs or charts, so instead of just using symbols, we could be able to have labels or text cues, which will be easier for communication. And number three, to have a proper color contrast used. We need to have a ratio determined for that. We will talk about that in a minute. And the last thing is usually we use red to highlight certain critical points when we are typing in digital materials, but avoid using red, and then we will see that in the slides coming up, and especially avoid red on a black background. So it's going to produce a low color contrast ratio, and that's going to be difficult to see even for a person with normal vision. So let's get into details for each of these guidelines. Before that, all these guidelines are pointing to. So who are being benefited by this? It's really helpful for people with low vision or partial vision, and for people who will not be able to identify certain colors. And then aging eyes, which needs increased contrast. And in addition, the others who benefit or the situations will be like low lights, or screenplay that could able to be benefited by using a proper color and contrast, and then we have monochrome screens. So here is an, so to include all these, we are using the guidelines set by WCG. And even then, there are some who are left out, especially people with visual or congenital disabilities that needs to be able to control size, combinations, and level of distraction. So the link here provided will direct you to the guidelines page, and this is the most recent version of it. So the guidance page is really helpful for each of the parameters we could use for making accessible digital document, and we could also have this as a reference to for different circumstances. So even this and guidance are being improved and it's being revised regularly to be more inclusive, but still we have few people left out in certain circumstances. So that's beyond the scope of this seminar. So I will try to explain the guidelines with the 4 points we have mentioned in the previous slide. So here is an example of how color contrast can be helpful and how the color contrast provided in addition to other labels or cues could be helpful. So for a normal person, the real colors could be seen, but for people who have issues identifying certain colors, they will not be able to get the message that's being put into this image. So including a label or a text along with this will be helpful. So let's talk about the very first step, which is for the standard 1.4.1 according to the WCG recommendation. You can find this in the link that I provided before. So do not use color to convey meaning because colors are not used just for conveying information or indicating an action, prompting a response, or distinguishing a visual element. So always try to combine color with an additional aspects, just like what you see in this slide. So here we are having colors, yes, but it's also been associated along with information provided by shape, by labels, and also by patterns and arrangement. So when we have these cues along with the color, it could be more helpful for people who need it, and also it could be more easier for everyone. And in normal scenario, normally what we use, so here is an example of a pie diagram. So the image in the left, you could just see 3 colors, but you could easily tell that the colors are not having enough contrast when compared to the background as well as among themselves. So this will be really difficult for any person who needs accessibility, visual accessibility to even get the information provided, even though the keys are present. So the alternative way to present this, of course, to highlight there are 3 different series in this by having a borderline placed, plus to include some patterns for each of the series. So the reader will be able to differentiate and able to identify the data that's presented. So the first point is not color alone. Please use it with labels or text or any additional information that's possible for the type of data you're presenting. Number 2, which is meet the contrast standards. So it is really essential to have color and contrast adjusted, and this is according to the standard guideline 1.4.3. And according to this, we will have the text and images against the background to have a contrast ratio of at least 4.5 to 1. So color contrast is pretty much the relationship or the luminescence that we could differentiate between the colors used. So for example, we could just compare this with brightness. So more brightness, pretty much we will have more luminescence, so it's easy to read. For example, white color will have high luminescence, whereas the black will have less luminescence. And then when we talk about color contrast standards, it's always depicted in ratio. And there are some exceptions to leave out when it comes to the contrast standards, especially for large text. The ratio can be a little bit less, like 3:1. Or if it is an incidental text or images, which are mainly for like decorative purposes. So we could have an exception for that as well. And the last one is the logo type. So logo type text for logos or for brands, we have an exception from color standards, color contrast standards. So color properties, when it comes to color properties, we normally care about the hue. So like red, orange, yellow, green, blue, or purple. But it is necessary to have the color and the contrast that's being regulated according to the ratio standard in order to see the difference and in order to have the information presented in a more efficient way, just like what we are seeing to the right. All these images having like a black over an orange background or green over a black background or sort of like plum color over pinkish background. All these pass through like the AAA standard, which is like an excellent standard of color contrast ratio, which is 8.421. So how we can able to determine this and what are the limitation for having the standards met or to have an exceptional standard? And this is another example. So we are having jets and we are having birds having jerseys. So just same color for each group in uniform. And then if this is being viewed by a person with a visual disability, so this is what they'll be seeing. So it's really difficult to even identify between the groups because the place will be moving all around. And one thing they could be able to use for identification of the logos on their hats, but you could see the poor contrast that's been used here. It's not very helpful. So how we can able to solve this? So here are the checkers and standards. So in order to have the standard met, for a normal text, the standard ratio should be 4.5 to 1. Whereas if you want to have an exceptional level of standard mean, then for normal text, it's going to be high, like 7 to 1. Whereas if it's going to be a larger text, the ratio can be a little bit low, like 3 to 1 for the AA standard. And if it's going to be exceptional, then we will have a little bit higher for 4.5 to 1. So it's not that difficult to remember this, but we don't need to. We could use some of the checkers to determine the contrast standards. So the very first one is the contrast checker, the WebM contrast checker. So if you just click on the side, this is what you'll be getting web. And you can have the foreground and the background color selected, and we could be able to get the contrast ratio, and it's also going to tell you whether the standard passed AA or AAA standards. So let's just play with it a little bit. Maybe let's pick a color. So let's say we will have maybe a purple text against. Let's just remind this to be a white background. The contrast is 4, and you could also increase the brightness, increase the lightness and brightness a little bit, so you could play with the ratio. And I did mention that red is not a very good color because we normally use red because it just pops out for normal eyes. So let's try that and see. So you could say that even a bright red against a white background, it did pass a little bit for the larger text, but for the normal text, it's not. And for blue, for example, sorry. it's better. So we could able to select and we could able to determine which color against a background or which contrast standard will be efficiently transcoding the normal text as well as the large text depending on what material you're presenting. And this is also being inbuilt in our white space. So for example, in here, so I have my syllabus in here, and then if I want to just check the color contrast, or if you want to change or highlight this, I could able to just go to the color selection. I could select the color. For example, let's just do a blue maybe. And then I could see if the standard is being met by this. And let's try a red. So you could see that it's this, the dark red did pass it. So you can able to do this within bright space when we are making materials for the courses. So that's really handy that comes within bright space. And the other thing I wish I had shown in detail is the color contrast analyzer. But unfortunately, I was not able to download this software, but it's really a handy tool to download and keep it in your system. So you could just do that for Windows or for Mac. And how it's going to work, I will just enlarge this and show how it's going to work. Sorry, I'm not able to get this downloaded and to have like a walkthrough, but it's pretty easy. So this is what the analyzer will look after you've downloaded and installed it into your system. So we have a foreground color and we have a background color. But the good thing about here is you don't need to tell the system which color you are using. Instead, you could use this eye drop tool, and then you could click on to the color you need in the foreground. Similarly, you can do that for the background as well. So if you're using a text or an image against a background color, this is really handy. And once you do that, it's going to give you a 6-digit codes in here. These are the hexagonal code. And every 2 numbers in here is going to be for one of the primary colors. So we don't need to get details in here, but the good thing is, after we finish selecting the foreground color and background color using the eye drop, so you could use that on the text, you could use that on just anything you want to check for color and contrast. And then you can see the results in here. It's going to give you the ratio and it's going to tell you whether the contrast has passed the standard for minimal, normal level standard or higher level standard, and it's going to also tell us the non-text contrast as well. So it just gives all the details, and this is really handy. So I recommend you to download this and then just keep it. You can just use it for any software, for any type of document you want to use. So tip 3, use limited color palettes. So this is really important because sometimes it's really attractive to use many colors in a second document, but it's going to cause distraction because when we have wide variety of colors used, it just diverts the focus. We don't know which ones are, because usually we highlight or we make it bold or we use a color to highlight certain important points. But when we use many colors, it's really distracting. The focus might be deviated and we don't know where to look and which message or which information is really important. So it just causes a chaos in understanding the digital material, and it's very much distracting when we use various colors. So what to do for that? Limit to maximum 3 colors. So maybe you can just have like a light, darker, and a medium color, and we already know how to check the standards, so use the color accordingly. And also use a color in a consistent way, meaning like, for example, if you're using a color for a heading, do the same for the whole document. And this will enable to minimize distractions and also use the color to set a tone or to say like which is critically important. So you could use that consistent throughout the materials, which would be easier for the reader to understand. So I hope I shared some basic information about color and contrast, and more details are available on our webpage. So you can have the slides as well as recordings available, and also written materials. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Thank you.